various versions and negotiations. We're on to, I think, version 9 that has fallen off, and Scott can speak to this, or probably Ms. Pastusha better, but it seems to be a non-starter for the city to have a floor. But that is not in the current version, which was the question to me. But if any other questions on the contract language, I do have it pulled up here.
Okay. Not dismissing that as not a rational thing, but you got your answer. Miss Dr. Blair?
Miss Dr. Blair, I like that. So one of my questions was kind of answered. There is no endowment right now, correct?
If there is one, it's exceedingly small or de minimis.
They have a foundation,
Yeah.
right? So there's a foundation that presently exists, but it doesn't have very much.
Do we know what your annual revenues are? I'm sure it's been in some report that I probably should remember. Oh, I know, I should probably have seen that. Oh, they're up here, they're actually in this thing, right? All right, thank you.
Others? Mr. Fennell?
As was reported, that there is, the city is a non-starter for having a minimum contribution, a floor. That doesn't say that it can't be, as Mr. Dillon was saying, that we would never exceed their portion of, and that could be very easily put into there. And I feel very agree with Jimmy in that clause. They've got the ownership of it, so as a non-starter, I think it's a non-starter for us to go that without that.
Mr. Dillon?
So I know in the agreement, and that's what I was going to say, we do have a clause. I'm not thrilled that that didn't make it into the final version, but I think there's an out clause for us that if the terms of this agreement would become unfavorable, that we exercise our out clause and renegotiate the deal. And for one, I've always been that the city is not negotiating from a strength position on this, even though I'm a city of Peoria resident. Any money that we put in on this is above and beyond to help their bottom line, and I understand the importance of this, and I believe that under the current management, this is going in the right direction. So the county would have, if management fell off or if the city fell off, we do have an out clause, and I'm thankful that there's a 10-year revote, because that was not originally included in the agreement. It was another 20-year agreement. I agree with you, Mr. Fennell. I would feel more comfortable if that line item was in there, but for the sake of timeliness, if it's not, I would hope that the fiduciary responsibility of this board would exercise an out clause and renegotiate the terms, because I don't think that the terms can be renegotiated at this point, is what I'm gathering.
That's what I'm gathering. So what's the price of the exit again, Scott? 1 year notice and $150,000?
Correct.
So that's above and beyond our contribution.
That's the way I would read that. That would be plus your annual dues. Dues being a fungible word there. Mr. Fennell, if you want to lay some kind of amendment to the agreement on the floor, I'm perfectly willing to entertain it. We'll
Yeah,
go for
I would like to
seconds.
amend it that in no way will our contribution exceed the city's.
Is that the right language?
A motion to amend, and need a second.
Okay. Is there a second on that? Dr. Blair? Okay, so now we would have discussion on the amendment.
Correct, and a vote on the amendment, and if that passed, then you would go back to the original motion as amended.
Okay. Discussion? Ms. Daly?
I do not disagree with the amendment, but what I believe is that there is not time to get this done with the city and the park district. And I certainly would never support having the county pay more money than the city. I'm a city appointee to the Springdale Authority Board, but clearly I would say that both Mr. Dillon and Mr. Fennell are correct when they say the city is not in a position of strength here. I mean, if they don't have this agreement, I can't imagine what they'll do to take care of the cemetery. So I agree with the amendment, I agree with your concern, and I certainly would never expect the county to pay more than the city. But my concern is that there is not enough time to go back to the park district and back to the city to get this done.
The time be, what clock is ticking? Their governmental meeting calendars or the
It
expiration?
expires, as I understand, 6 months. We have to have a new agreement 6 months before this one expires. Is that not correct, Scott?
That is correct.
Or what, like spaceships land on our building? I mean, what's the, or what?
Well, probably you don't have the authority to pay people to maintain
Okay,
the cemetery. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I agree. It sounds ominous, and I don't know what it means, but I wouldn't want to not have the money to pay maintenance people in the summer.
good point. Okay, so.
Again, if it's 6 months, you still got the money. It's still there. I think it's important enough that we push this through to get it the way we want it. There's no reason that if you got a cushion of 6 months, so it's a month later, they're still have the funds appropriations for it.
Are we at month 1 of that 6 months?
I believe the agreement expires in September, so we have to do this by March, I want to say 16th or something.
Approximately, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is your feeling? Do we have time to negotiate this?
Looking at that calendar up there, the votes go next week. We can certainly take things back to them this week. It's just, if they don't agree with it, then you've run out of time. So it's them voting next week unless I'm reading that wrong. So you've got a week.
Okay, so, let me go to Ms. Pastusha for a sec. Kate?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering if we are voting to revise at this point, the risk is that the city council and the park district are not going to accept our revision, and that delays the whole process. Is that correct? Or are we okay because we do still have our board meeting in March, which we could further revise?
I think the question is simply what happens when the contract comes to an end. And so we're within 6 months of its expiration. So to me, things should go on as they're going on until we get a contract. I don't think failing to get a contract makes the agreement blow up. I think 6 months from March 1 is what makes the agreement presently blow up. Fair?
That's correct. The current agreement would expire in September. If the parties wanted to negotiate under the old agreement, then the language is that you have to start doing that within 6 months. Doing this off of memory without the old agreement in front of me. So you can always have just a brand new agreement sometime in those next 6 months before it fully expires in September. It's the triggering event in the old agreement is that the parties want to re-up under the old agreement. You can always have a completely brand new agreement before September, if that makes sense.
All right. Anyone else? We would be Mr. Phil.
Yeah, the park district, this is doesn't affect them at all. So their vote, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, it's not gonna affect them. It's only the city and us.
And you're talking about financially.
Yes.
Well, they still do have maintenance of the
They
Savannah.
have to assign it, yes, but it's not gonna be a factor for them, a yea
Okay.
or nay factor.
Mr. Dillon?
So I don't know if we have a consensus around here, so what are we talking?
Well, I'm gonna call the vote, and we'll see.
Well, that's what I'm saying, should we vote on this as it is and then see what happens? And
I think
go-
we have to by roll vote on the amendment, and then we would vote on the motion as amended. Okay?
But, okay.
So, and let's use hands in addition to your voices, so the clerk, whoever that is, can
Can
get
you
a correct count.
clarify what we're voting on right now?
We're voting on a motion to amend the proposal before us that changes the floor of the agreement to where we don't put money in until the city does.
I think it was that if we were, I guess we were always first money in, but the city's always been higher than us. So the idea would have been like if the city was at like $20,000 a year, is there a clause that we would never? That's what I don't understand. The agreement's always that we're always first money in, and then the city assumes any responsibility after the fact. So their number's always been way higher than this. But if they get a $10 million endowment like this plan calls for, which is aggressive, what if the city's flip-flops and they're at 20 grand and then we're at 118 in year 8? That doesn't seem like a great deal for us either.
I'm going to ask council to clarify what the amendment should be.
Mr. Fennel moved to amend the current resolution to add a clause where at no time does the county pay more than the city under the agreement. So if you want to go back to the original resolution, you should vote no on the amendment. If you want the language to be added that the city is not ever, or I'm sorry, the county is not ever going to pay more than the city, you should vote yes on this vote. Then, after we've dealt with the amendment, we'll go back to the original resolution, either as it was initially proposed or as amended, depending on this vote. Clear as mud?
To answer Kay's question, though, it seems to me the simplest way to state it is we would be sharing any operating losses up to whatever our top number is in this agreement. We would be splitting them. Which I have to sit here and think through just for a second.
Yeah, we spent many of our, Mr. Chairman, trying to actually do that during earlier versions of this because obviously the Park District and the county are equally share 50-50 the first $80,000 of deficit, and then then we're on the hook for right now the next 62. So you'd be looking to split that number, or you try and figure out a way to split the first 80,000 three ways. The math becomes.
It became a math problem rather than a
Yes.
legal problem.
Yes, it did.
So could we, instead of saying that the city's ever in there, can we lower our out clause that if the city is not putting in any more money, that the terms of this agreement could be renegotiated so that we're not giving $102,000+ a year if they don't need it anymore? I mean, maybe that's an out clause for the city where if the city's not paying anything, this board could, without having to pay a penalty, could exercise an out clause for a renegotiation without paying a penalty. Maybe that doesn't blow it up as bad of, because you are right, the math starts getting hard of, since it's the first 80, then we're the next 62, how do you figure out all that? So if the city ever gets to a point where they're not paying a dime, we can renegotiate the terms without having to pay an out clause. Maybe that's more palatable for them.
Could we add something that stated the county can trigger renegotiating if the city's ever paying less than the county.
Something to that
And
extent.
then the park district could trigger a renegotiation if the city is ever paying less than the park district, which it would already be triggered, but
Can I make a suggestion that we defer this until we can get this worked out? I don't think there's a solution. I'm sitting here thinking about it. I don't think there's a solution to get to what either you guys are saying. I think we need an alternative amendment to the motion that comes up with some fairness equation differently, but I don't see how we get there mathematically, because we're trying to figure out how to split an operating loss between three parties, given the fluctuating contributions of a foundation, good, bad, or indifferent.
Can we withdraw the amendment? So at least,
That's one procedural step to do to get back to the original motion on the floor, to defer it for 72 hours and let them try to come up with something. I personally don't think they're going to come up with anything. I think the city's going to hold firm, but that'll just put us in the situation of having to get a special meeting before, is it the 10th, Scott? Yeah, we could have a meeting of this committee just prior to our regular meeting on the 10th to vote on whatever we have to vote on. Need a little help here, guys. You want to withdraw your motion there, Jim?
Well, I don't have a problem with that, but I still don't see why we're worried about our next meeting, that we have to have a special meeting to have this done before our
We may
next-
not need to. We may not need to, but I just, so I'm here clock ticking.
Yeah. I like some of the alternatives that Jimmy has suggested, but I still say, you know, the city doesn't have the grounds to stand on. I think we should stand on our ground and say, no, this is what we want, and let's do it. If it takes an extra month to do it, let's get it done.
I'm prepared to join you on that. I actually think we can get this done by the next meeting, to be
Okay,
totally
that'd
honest
be
with you.
good. Okay, with all that
'cause-
said, I will withdraw my motion.
Okay.
do I need to withdraw mine too? My second? Yes, I withdraw my second.
Okay, so we would be at the original motion to adopt. So now what we want to do is refer it back to executive committee. So do we can we get a motion to postpone the vote then? One, and Jimmy, you number two? All right, so we'd be at a that's a different trick. Well, you gotta get somebody to lift it off the table. So we would be at a motion to defer to committee, which we can all actively work with Scott on the extent to which we find something tolerable. And before we vote on this, I think we owe it to Scott, Kate, and whomever else from the county have been going into these meetings to give them some idea of what we find acceptable, because there may be something in here that the other two parties can accept that doesn't sound like whatever it is we've been trying to achieve here. Dr. Blair.
Scott, was the concern just that it was a math problem, or that there was some other concern?
I mean, part of it was definitely a math problem. Part of it was, I think, as was stated, the park district and the county are the first money in for the last 2 decades on average, and in many years it's exceeded. The city's been on the hook for at least $230,000, if not more than that, in operating deficit. And you know, while the intentions are good that the foundation's going to raise money and endowment's going to be created, the likelihood of that's happening is not very high. And being the first money in means that's the risk that we run should it come to fruition.
Sorry, Kate, I thought we'd get this through. You guys have worked really hard on it, but this is reasonably difficult language to try to sort
I understand,
through.
and that was definitely discussed. It just, the possibility of it actually happening was so slim, we decided to not worry about it. But if it means that, you know, to get support, we need to put something in there, I understand that also.
Thank you. All right, so all those in favor of referring this back to committee, please say aye. All those,
Aye.
Thank you, Paul. All those thoroughly exhausted from this discussion, please say aye. All right. So the motion carries and the commentary is affirmed. We would, and Scott, I think you should work with the body, members of the body, to find out what alternatives we can take over for discussion as opposed to go over there empty-handed and say we don't like something. Can I get a motion on today's, what I thought would be today's funnest topic, amendment number 2 to the Peoria Riverfront Museum bylaws, please? Thank you, Mr. Renaud. Thank you, Ms. Daly. Thank you all. There's a whole bunch of seconds on this one. I'm glad to see it. Let me set this up. Sometime many months ago, I received a call from Mr. Coulter, who's here today, and is not retired in spite of rumors to the contrary that he is. He's not. He's still very actively employed. And also the president and CEO of the museum is here today, our favorite John Morris. I got a call from Chris to freshen up the bylaws, and it turned into a much longer process because I think what originally they wanted a little bit of assistance with turned into what was, let's just look at it from soup to nuts and get it right. So I have worked with plenty of people to get to where we are here today, but I'd like to call on the Bylaws Committee chairperson, with your permission. That's Mr. Coulter. There's a sanitary microphone right there, Chris, to discuss what the museum sees in its needs for its constitution, if you will, its organizing charter here, the bylaws, and how well they're perceiving some of the negotiated elements. I think that we've all come to not arm wrestle, but thoroughly discuss in the interest of your organization and the interest of your landlord. And I want to frame this for you as best as I can say. We are simply the landlord. We own the building. We have a sales tax of 1/4 point out there that will sunset someday after we pay off the construction bonds. And when we created, when Peoria Riverfront Museum was created, we wanted to make sure we didn't just get a Lakeview 2.0. The county helped shape that organization by working on 2 things. One was a new set of bylaws and a new enterprise, hereinafter called Peoria Riverfront Museum, and we negotiated with them a lease operating agreement which governs how they behave as a tenant, and in that agreement include some bumpers that we expect so that they operate professionally and financially in a responsible way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the constitution of the organization, the bylaws, were put an awful lot of components that had to do with the then leadership of the organization, and that leadership has long since left and moved on to greener pastures. So some of what we'll hear discussed today has to do with getting rid of some of this super controlling language from yesteryear and then modernizing it to put them in a position to recruit the kind of talent they need to be corporate directors and run a good enterprise. The county's sole role in this, and we only reserved one little power, if you will, here, and that is to be the arbiter of whether or not they get to modify their bylaws. We had to give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. And of course, the second piece is within those bylaws, we get to put our arms on a couple of members of the 4-member nominating committee so we could have a voice to make sure that the organization was hearing from the county board whatever concerns or needs we think the museum could fulfill. So having framed it that way, I hope I didn't ruin a unanimous vote for you, but that's as good as it'll come for me. So, Mr. Coulter.
Thank you, Chairman Rand. And this thing says low battery, so if it shuts off on me, then that
all
I'm
right.
getting a message from above. Anyway, it's great seeing all of you, and I think we've all met, but Chris Coulter, and my role with the board, I serve on the board. I'm in my 4th year there, but I serve as the chair of its nominating committee. And I guess I'll go ahead and take fault. I'm probably responsible for bringing this to you, changing these bylaws, and kind of what happened in that process, especially when John and I both started at the same time, our CEO of the museum, is that just in my other service and other not-for-profit boards, it seemed like this board, we were 3 at-large members short. And of course, recruiting, members of the community to serve on this board, it just, like I said, it just seemed to me that we were 3 at-large members short. So you'll in your packet, you'll have the changes, and there's a lot of changes, but what I did is the handout really I think these are the major things that you want to digest. And we're not asking for any action on these bylaws today. Really, this is an opportunity to get in front of you. We've had meetings with Chairman Rand, with Scott, with Jenny on this already. We get to this point. We did have a bylaws committee for the museum board that we've met a few times to get to this point. But I think the big issue is the one that's the first one, and it's in boldface. And so, what's changed, since, the museum was Lakeview, turned in the Peoria Riverfront Museum, moved to, the county property here in downtown Peoria, is that number one, Caterpillar, has moved its world headquarters from Peoria to Deerfield. And secondly, IHSA has moved its tournament from Peoria to Champaign. And as a result of those moves, we can definitely see, that the engagement from both Caterpillar with its board service and the IHSA with this board service has changed, okay? So now the good news is on Caterpillar's account, its financial support of the museum has not changed. So that's very good. So that has continued, the matching contributions have continued, but definitely the engagement from their designated board seats has changed to the point that the last 2 members were Lee Fosberg, who was their archivist, who left the board before his term was up, which the Caterpillar did not replace him, and then Darren Yergler, who's an HR director for Caterpillar, also did not fulfill or did not start his 2nd term. He was very well aware of these discussions, and actually in his resignation email to John, supported what we were doing here. And still is a member of the museum, but supported what we were doing here as far as changing the 2 designated Caterpillar board seats and the 1 designated board seat for the IHSA and making those at-large seats. So currently there's 21 members of the board, 16 are at-large, 5 are designated. And so with this bylaw change in Article 4, Section 2, basically we would actually turn those designated board seats from Caterpillar and from the IHSA to at-large seats, okay? So Caterpillar is aware of it. John has also been in touch with Henry Vickery, as kind of the community relations person for Caterpillar. They're aware of it. So I think it's important that you know that. And we have not had any pushback or any objections to what we're doing. I mean, the goal here is if we change these designated seats to at-large seats, is that actually it gives the museum, the opportunity to actually find people from Caterpillar, that want to serve, okay? And we do have some people in mind and from Caterpillar that would like to serve in it, which I think would make a big impact. So I think that's probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is changing those designated board seats to at-large seats. I can tell you we definitely have engagement from the African American Hall of Fame designated member, and as well as the Peoria Historical Society. So there's been no issues there, okay? And we would not propose any changes to that.
Let me interrupt you there. One of the things that we made certain of when we created this, and it was not what the then powers to be at Lakeview wanted, was these groups, African American Hall of Fame, the Historical Society, IHSA, and then Lakeview, were all lobbying then Congressman LaHood, now retired Secretary LaHood, for some funds to help with capital costs. And it was Mr. LaHood that encouraged all of them to work together for a common structure that they could share, which ultimately led to a referendum passed by the voters of this county to support a public facilities tax, which was intended to construct the Peoria Riverfront Museum. So we wanted to make sure, we being myself and Kevin Lyons, who was then the state's attorney, that all the people that helped carry that water through were hard-coded into the bylaws as designated entities. So that's the genesis of how they got in there. So over time, again, things change, and that's one of the things they're seeking to modify. They're not seeking to cut the number of members out. They're just wanting to take the labels off of them and choose people from the at-large point of view.
Thank you very much. No, that was a great explanation, background of that. So second thing, terms of office. So again, just through, I think, not just myself, but other board members, participation in other not-for-profit boards, typically you'll see, usually, at least my experience, is that you'll see that a board member can serve, 2 4-year terms or 3 4-year terms, or even possibly 3 3-year terms. So this was unique that the board service was confined to 6 years. And so anyway, to address this, that's why we're proposing a change. Currently, I serve 2 3-year terms that you could actually have the opportunity to serve 3 3-year terms. And then at the end of the 9th year, you'd have to go off for a year if you tried to come back on. So so I wanted to point your attention to that change. The next one, and this is, I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview. So you can see the next one's Article 4, Section 4G on enumerated powers. This isn't going to be the last time we're going to be coming to you as far as bylaw changes. So what we're dealing with right now is the museum. We also have the foundation. And those are probably ones that we need to focus on even more than these. But it's, the foundation, I was kind of hearing you talk about Springdale and the endowment. And so what's great is that we do have a very good endowment with the foundation, which I think the county was very astute, making sure that there was going to be enough money in that endowment to make sure that the museum was going to succeed. But how that relationship works between the museum board and the foundation board, isn't clear cut. This is an opportunity we're taking to make it a little bit clearer, okay? So this is brand new language here. Hold an annual meeting as a sole member of the PRM Foundation, in which the foundation's directors are elected and regularly monitor the actions of the foundation's board, including making recommendations to the foundation's board regarding the foundation's investment policy statement. We actually put that into practice at our end of the board meeting in June of last year. This now codifies that, makes it a reality, okay? So, but we eventually will be coming to you with changes to the foundation's bylaws. So I just want to kind of set the stage for that. The next one, Article 6, Section 2B, term of office. So this has to do with board officers. And, basically, if you are a board officer, which would either be you're the chair of the board, vice chair, treasurer, secretary, you can only serve 3 one-year consecutive terms, and then there's basically a ceiling on you. There's an opportunity for the board chair to get a 4th year, but the other officers couldn't. So I want to tell you what we kind of ran into. So Brian Ray, who's the regional president for PNC Bank, was the treasurer of the museum board and was doing a fantastic job. And anyway, due to this provision, the bylaws, he had to stop being treasurer this fiscal year. Now, fortunately, we had a board member who did not want to continue in the role of secretary. And so anyway, Brian has now taken over the role of secretary. But to have, the president of the community's largest bank and and PNC has been, very engaged, very, sponsorships and stuff. It was kind of an unfortunate situation. So by deleting this language, it basically takes that, you know what I mean, it addresses that for the future. Okay, so, but anyway, I just wanted to kind of explain what we ran into with that this year, which I don't think it's kind of one of those unintended consequences. Next article, this actually is new language that's actually speaking of the treasurer for the board. Basically requires the treasurer to have a meeting with the chair of the board of directors for the Peoria Riverfront Museum Foundation to discuss the foundation's endowment and the foundation's investment policy. So again, trying to put some more oversight there between the board and the foundation board. And I should also mention, one of the key drafts persons, I'd say, definitely the one who's been doing the heavy lifting on changing the language is Derek Schreier, who's an attorney with Davis and Campbell. And Derek is a board member for the museum, but prior to him becoming a museum board member, he was actually the chair of the Peoria Riverfront Museum Foundation Board. Okay, so I just want to connect the dots that, a lot of this language that's happening, you know what I mean, Derek is very involved in it, so has this knowledge, and he stopped being the chairman of the Peoria Riverfront Museum Foundation Board due to term limits. And so when that happened, that's when we brought him onto the board. Okay, so anyway, I just thought you'd like to know that he's involved with this. Article 8, Associate Board. This was in the bylaws, supposed to be created. I've been on the board for 4 years. There's no associate board. So anyway, there's no reason to have an associate board at this time. I think there was some good thinking about that, but anyway, it's just not something that's ever happened. So I think one of the things that John has done is he's created an advisory council that basically is fulfilling that mission. So anyway, the associate board has never met, hasn't had a meeting, there's no members, so anyway, why have it? Finally, the change here with Article 8, Section 2B on standing and special committees. So as the chair of the nominating committee, as we recruit people to serve on this board, we have to get the approval, you know what I mean, basically of the chair of the board, the designated board member from Caterpillar, which will go away, and then obviously from the chair of the Peoria County Board. So basically the huge change here is that the designated Caterpillar's role in this would obviously go away, okay, which would make things a lot easier in my life and I think for my successor. The other thing too, just from a functional standpoint, is it preserves the county's role in this, but what we've tweaked it so that it was actually just the county where we're actually making it the county board chair. So what's happened in the past is that these nominations have gone up to the county board chair. So we're basically codifying what the practice has been, but clearly, you know what I mean, the county still has a role, okay? But that's the reason for that change. So anyway, those are the highlights. Like I said, we're not asking for any action today, but kind of what's next is the Peoria Riverfront Museum Board has its next meeting on March 16. What you have in your packet will be the board will finally take formal action. They've seen this, they've more or less approved it without taking action. So I'm very confident that it'll be unanimously approved by the museum board. Then what will happen is they'll come back to this committee. Hopefully I got the date right, Scott. It was cut off in my head, March 22. And then assuming if you all approve it at the March 22 meeting, then it'll go to the full board, your board, on April 14 for approval. So that's kind of the steps as far as taking action on these changes to the bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Behind every great board member is a great president. Does Mr. Morris want to add anything, or is he uniquely silent? All right. You're fine.
Just an expression of gratitude to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the board members. These are your bylaws. I work for my board, and our board serves at the pleasure of the building you own. So I'm here to carry out whatever you all vote on.
Thank you. Best private museum in a public building in the country. So, as you say, there are a bunch of bring it up to date changes. There are a bunch of changes and I'm talking about in the text that's in here that have to do with how the thing opened and some of the startup stuff. These are the more substantive adjustments. They don't functionally change anything about the way the museum works, except as how Chris Coulter noted. We had counsel with us. She's free to comment on how she sees this, but we still are the body that has to approve any changes to their bylaws. And then, of course, as you can see, we have some influence in how they propagate and build that board of directors through the nominating committee, which is arguably the most powerful committee in any private organization, particularly a 501c3. Our nominating committee are the citizens of Peoria County, so we answered to a different boss. Any comments? Go around the room. I'd like to make sure John and Chris know how we feel before they leave. Looks like you did too good a job.
I was just going to ask,
Go ahead, Phil.
how do you take nominations?
I'm always asking. In fact, I'll put it out on the table if you have anyone that you think would be a good, board member. I'm constantly asking people in the community, but typically, as far as the board, every board meeting, I always remind everyone we're looking for, great candidates for board service, as well as our nominating committee. So we're pretty open about it, we're always looking to. I'm kind of big on the group dynamics. You know what I mean? That what skill sets could we use? Especially I think with Kat. I think there's a gentleman that could help us, but that obviously knows the visitor center really well. That was involved with building that, so knows the campus property well. So, obviously we're always looking for diversity, from the community. So I think we've done a pretty good job, with some of the, especially with some of our newer board members. But I'm always looking for feedback, looking for input. So I throw that out there to you. I mean, especially with this change that this is approved, it's going to give us three new opportunities. So we've got 2 board members now. We actually have 2 board members that will be going off if these changes aren't approved. I don't know if they're going to want to re-up for another 3-year term. So we're definitely going to have 3 new openings, possibly up to 5.
Does that answer your question, Phil?
Thank you.
Sure. If you serve on a nonprofit board, Phil, you know that we're always looking for members. Always. Miss Daly, then Miss Pastucia.
I just wanted to say I have served on the Peoria Riverfront Museum Board, and I think you get a great sense of satisfaction seeing the almost unlimited appeal of the things they have to offer to this community. And I think these are good changes to your bylaws.
Thank you very much. I just have to say that Ms. Daly was responsible for me kind of getting involved in this. So I just want to acknowledge that, that you got me involved in that. So hopefully you're satisfied that I've really gotten more involved in this.
Yes, very
Yeah.
satisfied.
Where did I go straight to? Okay. All right, so I've lost track of my place. We actually have this item on the floor, so we can and should vote on it today. Let me go to Kate.
I just wanted to say the changes recently in the museum are noticeable and very positive. As somebody who goes there, tries to get there more often than I do, but it's nice to see new displays, and I really, I know that the IHSA display was well loved, but it's nice to have something new to go see, and the dinosaur exhibit was fantastic. So thank you for the board, and thank you, John, whoever's involved in the decisions, you're doing a great job.
Thank you for that, Ms. Pastuccia. And John's been an incredible leader, and he's got an incredible team. And I know he would tell you that if he was here at the microphone. So we really got quite a momentum thing going on right now. So hopefully keep it up. But the gentleman here to my left deserves a lot of credit. So.
All right, so aside from me losing track, thank you, council, for reminding me where we are. Our lease operating agreement actually requires us to approve the changes before they vote on them, so it makes sense for us to do it today and then get it into our pending board meeting coming up. So if there are no other questions, we can handle our part, which would then move it on to the full board, right? What's the full board meeting date, Scott? 10th, so just a few days. It's on the floor. That's what I lost. He mesmerized me. I lost track of the fact that we put it on the floor with all those seconds over there. All right, so all those in favor of the amendments to the Peoria Riverfront Museum bylaws as proposed, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Paul. Any opposed, same sign? And we will consider that unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and
Gentlemen.
I'll plan to come back then to March 10. I mean, this is a lot sooner than I think we were expecting, so we really appreciate it. Does that sound right, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay, we'll be here. Thank you very much.
This being the largest committee of the board, Chris, though, does represent the likely majority outcome. Scott, the civil litigation settlement.
You're right, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right, so, counsel, please.
A high-level view, if you want to get into details, we can go into a closed session, but this is a piece of litigation that we actually did go into a closed session, I believe it was in July, and brought this to you in advance of a mediation, and got a number from you all, and did, in fact, successfully negotiate a settlement, and so this resolution before you now is asking for $200,000 to go ahead and settle that within the range that you gave us. And again, happy to go into any details. If we want to go into closed session, we can review the details of the litigation and the claims. This is a Headington Oaks civil litigation here in state court. Oh, there you go.
And a second? Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Discussion? No discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Paul. Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you very much. Any committee chairs or vice chairs need to leave early? Move you up on the standing agenda list. Otherwise, I'll go as they're in your packet. Beginning with Mr. Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just had one resolution, and that was to settle a workers' comp claim out at the sheriff's office with one of their correctional officers.
Thank you very much. Mr. Salzer.
We're going to top you all because we got 6 resolutions to go through here, and of course our first one is with Bradley University, and that's tied to what we call the pavement management program. And we've been in this with the civil engineering department up there for several years. They do a good job of examining our roads and so forth. They report back and deal with our highway department. Our highway department has been very satisfied with them, and so we are going to extend to them this contract again, and it's going to cost us $26,000. Now, this next resolution has to do with a speed limit out in on West Robertson Road, which is in Radnor Township. It's on the west side, and a group of residents there asked that it be posted. The state law says that the speed limit basically is 30 miles per hour, but we did not have this area posted, and we agree with the highway department that it should be posted, and so that will be done if it is approved at our general meeting. The third resolution, a preliminary engineering service that we are going to hire Infrastructure Engineering, which is a minority contractor. They do have an office here in the Peoria area, and it has to do with with the slope walls. The slope walls are deteriorating. In regard to this Blue Ridge bridge, it's a 3-lane bridge up there in the Chillicothe area, and it's going to cost us a little over $45,000 to do this, and the money will come out of our county bridge fund. So we're okay there and so forth. The fourth resolution was a bid that had to be submitted. I should say that we put out in regard to a culvert replacement, and this is in Timber Township, a southwest part of Timber Township, and the cost of this, or I should say the size of the work of this, was going to be too great for our county highway department to do, so it was put out for bids. There are 4 contractors bid on it, and Stark County, who's actually getting a lot of work over here. We've dealt with Stark County several times. They bid it, and they were the low bidders. They're out of Bloomington, Illinois, and I think they bid somewhere in the neighborhood of $258,000 on the job, and the highway department asked us to approve the figure of $270, so that if they do come up with any problems, so forth. So that extra amount of money is contingency, and if we don't use it, then we will get it back, and it will go back into our county bridge fund. The last 2 actually were basically similar. They have to do with seal coating in the townships, and as you know, the township motor fuel tax is under the jurisdiction of our county highway engineer. She has to approve this before they can get any of their funds. The state passes it on to, of course, Amy. Amy, she checks to see that all of the dots are followed and so forth, and she's got to agree, of course, that all the specifications are in line. So once the paperwork is all done, then these townships are going to get their money. And in these 2 particular instances, both of these townships, Rosefield, and I think that's where Board Member Wendy is the road commissioner, and the other one is Millbrook. And so they both wanted Porter, and so they've done it pretty early here so that they can secure the use of Porter, and we have approved that in both cases. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Salzer. Questions? Mr. Dillon?
We had 4 ZBA cases. The first one was a petition of Briscoe Financial. That was on Front and Washington Street, so it's a little different. It has a shared easement for the drive, so there was an added restriction to that from a letter from the Township Road Commissioner about not allowing parking on the easement. So the petitioner and the objector were both here. And one of the things that came about from our ZBA hearings, and it was Jennifer's idea when we talked about signing or not, but all landowners that would adjoin these properties should receive a certified, we shouldn't receive notice of the, but they would send a certified mail with the owner's contact information so that the adjoining owners would be able to call the owner of the property without it. So that one passed out of ZBA 4-2, and then it passed yesterday out of committee, I think 6-1, with one objection.
Just curious, how often if they had a different person moved into that area, I'm a new person, how would I get notified?
You wouldn't. So you would only be notified on the initial purchase of it to get the hearing. But then these ZBA things are only good for the initial petitioner. So if even if that homeowner would sell this house, it doesn't always become.
Okay.
But the initial for the hearing, the initial thing would be to pass it along. You would hope that the homeowner would say, here's the number of the house next to you if you need it, or pass it along. But there's no clause of every time the house next to it goes for sale that you would know. This is the house here that has the pickleball court when you come down. So that passed. Another one, a petition of Briscoe Financial, that was unanimous out of ZBA, and then unanimous out of our board. The petition of Cornwall Solar, this is Trajectory Energy, but that's a 200-some acre, 40 megawatt solar array in Monica. That passed flying colors out of ZBA and the board. And the last was the petition of Peoria County, which was the wind amendments that didn't get published, but it changes the fee structure of what the ordinance says. So that'll be it.
Thank you, Mr. Dillon. Any questions for that chairperson? All right. Mr. Rosenbaum, are you going to work from the phone, or is somebody in the room going to cover for you?
Oh, I'd like to thank Brandy for running the meeting for me today. She did an excellent job. If she wants to do it, she can, else I can do it from the phone.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Paul. She's smiling.
All righty. The first resolution we had was a rollover appropriation of unspent funds from 2020 for the JAG funds. It was roughly around, I believe, what they're wanting to do is take it, they got it approved that they could roll it into this year's. It's right on $16,000, I believe, if my memory serves me correct. And the other one was budget appropriations for the court systems. They got a grant, I believe, for $174,000, and that was our two resolutions.
Thank you very much. Well spoken.
Thank you.
Any comments from the members? All right, seeing none, then we would be back to Mr. Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had two resolutions. The first one was to refinance the county nursing home bonds and hopefully get a favorable rate. And then the second one was for the sale of the county nursing home, resolution for the sale of the county nursing home to Methodist Medical Care, Inc., or Unity Point.
Thank you. A little bit of a technical question. The sale of the subject property, the purchasing entity is whom?
Methodist Medical Center of Illinois, not for profit.
So it's the operating company. No, it's the foundation. It's the what is that relative to UP?
They're the not-for-profit entity that has an affiliation agreement with Unity Point Health that is going to be transitioning to be Carl Health.
So all the physical assets are still locally owned by MMCI?
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Any other questions for this somewhat lengthy meeting? Sorry about my faux pas of forgetting that we had a resolution on the floor. I am fallible. We would be at miscellaneous. Oh, no, Lord, no. Executive session. Let's do miscellaneous, any miscellaneous business for the board. Mr. Sorrell?
I'll let the members go first, but I do have one on behalf of Ms. Williams, but you can go around the horseshoe first, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Salzer?
I was just going to comment that in this week's newspaper, they had the article about the robotics and wanted to develop. Now, the people that know we have Keystone money, would that be something that we might
Yes.
want to be looking at?
They've called me.
What?
They've called me.
Great.
They've called. Actually, they emailed me.
Oh, that's too bad.
That's okay. It's how they work. They're all younger than me. It's how they work.
So they want. So they'll never contact me then.
Dr. Blair.
Yes, that's me. Here in the Peoria area, we have the Founding Females Conference, first annual Founding Females
Oh, how
Conference
cool.
on Saturday. If you go to foundingfemales.co, you can register and attend and learn all about starting your own business in this area.
Is it .co proper?
Yeah, .co.
Okay. All right. .co. Any others? All right. So before I make a mistake.
So I have one on behalf
Scott,
of Ms.
right.
Williams, Mr. Chairman. Just to update the committee, Ms. Williams has been your advocate along with staff in the discussion of the Hannah City Trail for a number of years. The Village of Hannah City did successfully receive the DNR grant that will go towards the acquisition of the the Union Pacific Rail line, the other UP, the Union Pacific Rail line that terminates on Kickapoo Creek Road and goes all the way out to Table Grove and Fulton County past Farmington. The reason for the update is not that. The reason for the update is that the village has started to circulate a draft intergovernmental agreement that would put the county on the hook for a substantial amount of annual operating and maintenance expenditures. That is not something we ever signed up for, nor wanted to take on the liability for. And at Ms. Williams' request, I drafted a letter and sent it to the village's corporation council that essentially stated just exactly that. And if they want to come back and have a conversation about how that looks with a substantially less risk, liability, and expense on the county's part, we'll be happy to have that conversation. I leave anything out, Sharon?
Sharon's got the floor.
I guess, well, part of the reason that we've decided not to sign on to this intergovernmental agreement is that there could just be a lot of liability. There are 7 structures on the trail that potentially could be needed to be replaced or maintenance on it. There's also some issues with drainage. Also, there could be some environmental impact. Hannah City is looking into that right now to find out. They're going to be doing actually an environmental study. But in speaking with Scott and the chairman, Jimmy and a couple of others, I just really feel like this would be putting Peoria County in too much liability.
Thank you. So can we describe it as a pending conversation, an ongoing conversation? But we have indicated a no thanks on this, accepting liability for stuff that we don't need to do. Sure.
I really feel like our liability also is with the sheriff's department. They are the ones that are currently going out on the property when there's some problems with UTVs and ATVs. So I appreciate their help on that. But that's really in my view, that's the extent of the liability that we should have.
Thank you. Did I see your hand, Brandy? Okay. It was close. It was close. All right. Can I get a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters, number 1, and for pending litigation? Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Kate. All those in favor, please say aye.